And so
Yeah.
that's why anxiety, we can get stuck in anxiety, because what our tendency is to do is to avoid, to run away. And that's not creating positive experiences to draw upon, to feel safe to do that, to be in that situation. So the common causes are stress, trauma, our body's way of trying to protect us from that thing happening again. So that's why it's really important, like you said, that when you feel anxiety coming in, before it gets into a full-blown attack, it's like, is this about now?
Yeah.
Or is this about then? You know? And
Yeah.
this week's quote is a Will Smith
Yes.
quote.
It's one of my favorite quotes. I love it.
I think it explains it really well, doesn't it? So I'll say it. He says, "Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present, or may not ever exist. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice."
That's a fact. We really, we have a choice in the moment to fear something that may never happen, or to accept that accept things as they are. So ask yourself this, is this a fear based on something that could actually happen, or am I creating this in my mind? Because
Absolutely.
that's what anxiety really is. It's a creation of something in the future that hasn't actually happened or may never actually happen.
Yeah. And it's often caused by past experiences, isn't it?
Yes,
Or
yes.
beliefs or thoughts. And it makes us project into the future. And it's that it's linked very much into the unknown, when when we don't know what the outcome is. Some people might find that exciting, but other people can catastrophize that, and that's going to cause anxiety. Now, it's fair to say that anxiety is a normal human emotion and it has a purpose. But when we're talking about anxiety today, we're talking about problematic anxiety.
Yes.
So anxiety is our warning sign to pay attention. But sometimes people can be triggered and have anxiety, and there isn't any real danger. It's just a perceived or imagined danger. So it reminds me actually of when my children were little. So I have two children. Ben's the old one, and Elliot is 19 months younger. And Benjamin was always very nervous. So if you took him to like the park, and you'd have to really hold his hand as he goes up the steps, and he'd sit on the top and he'd think about going down, and he'd think a bit more about going down, and then he would look at how high he was, and then he would not want to go down the slide. The longer he's on there not going down the slide, the less likely he was going to go down. Whereas Elliot, and you might find this a lot with your second child, I don't know if anybody out there does, but he is fearless. Like as a child, he would just nosedive head first, no perception of danger at all, which also isn't great, to be fair. But it actually brought Ben out of his shell, and we're going to talk about this later, but having positive experiences around that anxiety actually diminishes the anxiety. So Ben would be like, "Oh," at the top. Elliot would be like, "Get out of the way," head dive down the slide. Woo! I really enjoyed myself. And after a few times, Ben would be like, "Oh, actually, nothing bad happened. I'll have a go." And so that's why anxiety, we can get stuck in anxiety, because what our tendency is to do is to avoid, to run away. And that's not creating positive experiences to draw upon, to feel safe to do that, to be in that situation.
And you actually reminded me of something. I went to this kind of a playground thing with my ex and his son, and they had this fireman pole, and all the kids were going on it. So I went to go on it, and I was so scared. I was so scared. And then all the kids were coming lining up behind me, and the line was getting bigger, and I got more and more scared. But the kids were really encouraging, and I was just like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. And it was actually the children that alleviated my anxiety. I was an adult at this stage. And it's just amazing that can work. Like, their bravery spurred me on.
Yeah, and that's another thing about community and who surrounds you
Yeah,
with your
exactly.
anxiety, because sometimes you just need a bit of reassurance,
Yeah,
you know?
you really do.
Yeah.
It's gas.
Oh, there's another story I've got to tell it about my Elliot, who's fearless. Another slide story, and so we're at this play center, and we're in this play center that had really big, the death drop slides, the ones that are like that and go down at the bottom. Like I'm so fearful of those. And obviously Ben, I mean, they were too young to really go on them. But anyway, I was sat having my brew with my family, and I turned around and Elliot wasn't in the toddler area anymore. And I was like, so he must have like climbed over the edge and got out. And I was like, where is he? I'm looking everywhere, panicking. And I look up just in time to see him drop himself from the top of this slide. And it was like one of these big warehouses. It was right at the top. And I was like, oh, as you are, like, oh my God, I think he must have only been about 3 years old, And so I legged it over to the bottom, and he just had the best time. He was
Yeah.
laughing his head off, And it's just, I think also I would have stopped him having that experience because of my anxiety.
Your anxiety. And it was perceived anxiety because the thing that you were thinking about didn't even happen. I've said this about Elliot before. He's an old soul.
Yeah.
Definitely he's been on this planet before, 100%.
Yeah. And actually, just like the people around us um, can support us and push us forward, people around us can create our anxiety or
Yeah.
increase our anxiety. And actually, when I was looking at like triggers for what might cause anxiety, one of them is genetics. But also, is it genetics or is it the environment you're growing in? Are you grown up with somebody who is super vigilant about all the dangers all the time? Where you're always like, oh, don't do that. That's dangerous. Don't touch that. Don't go near there. If
Yeah,
he
it's
has an anxious
learned
parent,
behavior. It really is learned behavior. And if you detach yourself from those situations, you can unlearn
yeah,
it.
absolutely. Yeah. So, what is anxiety? Anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease about something with an uncertain outcome. It's a natural response to stress, but it can become overwhelming or chronic for some people. When anxiety is persistent and interferes with daily activities, it may be considered an anxiety disorder. Now, we're not saying that, but you can be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. It often involves physical symptoms like a racing heart, sweating, trembling, not being able to think clearly, not breathing properly, so not feeling like you can get enough oxygen in, feelings of impending doom, and it can affect both the mind and the body.
That's it. Like an anxiety attack and a panic attack are quite similar. But anytime I've never really had a panic attack per se, but I've had anxiety attacks, and that's when it's more based in the mind. When the mind goes into overdrive, and it's just a complete spiral downwards.
Yeah.
And there is many different things that we can do to alleviate that. So we'll speak about them in a while as well.
Yeah. So it's starting in the mind.
Yes.
And then you have a bodily reaction to that.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. So some common causes of stress. What I actually did is in Teacher Mindset Matters, I put a little poll to see what what people thought, and the most common one was financial. That was considered what they thought other people were going to be worried about, and that actually also comes up in the statistics. I checked the UK statistics, and that is the most common problem for anxiety, worry around being able to pay bills and things.
Yeah, that was me back in about 2023. I used to get anxiety attacks due to financial issues and kind of fear of the unknown as well, like uncertainty.
Yeah,
that was it as well.
Of how you
pay. Yeah,
and we live certainly in the UK that it is very uncertain, and prices of. I remember the mortgage rates were just going up so fast. Like I was getting a letter every month that my mortgage was going up, and at the time wages weren't going up, and so there's real worries, that can cause anxiety, but that can then spill out into other areas. So you can be feeling anxious because of that, but then you can end up having anxious thoughts and impending doom and catastrophizing in other areas of your life.
That's it. It's kind of one fear comes in and then another fear comes in on top of it. Like, that's the analogy I was having this morning. was like, we have to catch the first fear when it comes in. Those baseball machines where the baseball comes out and you have to hit it? But like if you're not paying attention, they'll come all at once, and they're going to hit you in the face. So like the way an anxiety attack can spiral is that one fear will come in, another. So the secret is to hit the first one out in the field at the first goal. The minute it comes in, ask yourself, is this real or is it based on a fear from the past that that isn't actually real in this moment?
Past trauma. Or
something. So make sure if you are going into kind of any kind of a spiral, catch the first one in its tracks.
Yeah, and it's a bit like what we're saying about any kind of negative thought pattern. It's so much easier to avoid the spiral in the first place than pull yourself out of the spiral. You can pull yourself out of a spiral, but it's so much easier if you catch the first one, catch the moment it starts to come in, because otherwise where attention goes, energy flows, and then you just expand it into this big catastrophe that's going to happen and all these bad possibilities. So the common causes are stress, trauma, it says genetics, but I would say family influences probably, or environments, or when we were young. Medical issues can actually cause anxiety. Thyroid problems and heart problems can actually make you more prone to anxiety attacks. Substance misuse, including caffeine. I need to tell myself this.
Yeah, although I haven't drank caffeine now for over a year, I'd say. So I drink decaf coffee all the time now.
So it's not necessarily going to cause you anxiety in the first place, but it's certainly going to make it worse if you have a tendency to get
if you drink too much of it and you get on that high and then you come down, then it's just your mind starts to kind of go all over the place.
Yeah. Environmental factors. So if you have like a major life change or financial difficulties or moving house or changing jobs, because there's a lot of unknowns around that. It's almost like a bit like imposter syndrome, but when it goes wrong, isn't it? Well, not that imposter syndrome is great, but when you're moving into a new environment, you're out of your comfort zone, and that's when your body's like, oh, I need to be on alert, but that can turn into anxiety. So some quick statistics that I thought was interesting: 37% of women and 30% of men in 2002 to 2003 reported high levels of anxiety. So that was as we were coming out of the pandemic. So it's interesting that women seem to suffer more from it than men. But actually, it's most prevalent in 16 to 29-year-olds. So it's the young people that tend to suffer with anxiety more, and it tends to taper off and get lower and lower as people age.
For me personally, I'd say it was from teenagehood until I was about 30. And then when I, discovered inner healing and meditation, I was able to actually, and the law of attraction actually, that was one of the really biggest ones that helped me come out of anxiety. So yeah, it was my early 30s when I actually started to be able to heal myself, heal my anxiety and depression.
Yeah. And you're going through a lot of bodily changes. Your brain's not completely, fully functioning as an adult's would until you're like 25. It's not fully, your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. So all those changes that are happening internally and all those new emotions and things that you have to deal with, it's, there's no wonder that that's when anxiety can creep in and get become problematic.
That and toxic relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the trauma, isn't it? Because anxiety can come from trauma, and so it's our body's way of trying to protect us from that thing happening again. So that's why it's really important, like you said, that when you feel anxiety coming in, before it gets into a full-blown attack, it's like, is this about now? Or is this about then? Is this feelings about the past when I was in that situation and that was dangerous, or that was a bad thing that happened to me? Is that actually happening now, or is this just triggering me and reminding me of that? Yeah,
that's it. And that's the thing, like these days, if anything comes up for me, I will say to myself, I start to feel all the fears coming in. I'm like, no, hold on a second. Is this true for the moment, or is this based on a past experience? It's that simple.
You
Do you
say
know
that.
what I mean? If we can address it like that, you know, it's easy enough to kind of bat it away like that baseball.
Yeah.
You know, it really is.
Yeah. So globally, it's thought that, no, sorry, in the UK, 5.6% are estimated to suffer from an anxiety disorder, not diagnosed, but bad enough to be diagnosed. Obviously, people with anxiety are not necessarily able to come forward, you know. And that, when I put it into these numbers, it's quite astounding. So that's less that. So there's more than 1 in 20, every 20 people is suffering from anxiety, and it might be something to bear in mind when we go out into the world. You know, and we're being judgmental of other people and how they behave and how they go about their day. Are they suffering from a bit of anxiety?
I can sense it now. You know, even the simple thing of, you know, being on a bus and something and seeing a school kid, and you could actually sense the anxiety because you know what you went through. Even the simple thing of just being around people as a teenager was just so scary, and you could actually see it in body language these days.
Yeah,
and you can actually feel compassion because you're like, oh my god, I can see it in their movements that they're feeling anxious.
yeah. So I used to get really. So I had social anxiety made worse by avoiding social situations, which then made it even bigger. So it got to the point where I had agoraphobia. Like I would really try and avoid even leaving the house at one point, you know, if I could help it. And I used to find sort of young, attractive people particularly triggering. Like I wouldn't be able to look at them, or because I felt like they would have been the popular people, and I felt like I was an outcast by popular people. You know, like I wouldn't fit in there, wouldn't like me. I didn't think people generally liked me anyway, but particularly those, I would feel intimidated and get anxiety and have all these thoughts about people thinking about me when they probably hadn't even noticed me, you know, and then head down and
Yeah, I used to
scuttling
always
away.
walk with my head down as well. I said that to you before, like, you know, just fear of everything, fear of the outside world, or, you know, even fear of judgment. There's so much things that can go through our minds when we're not, you know, introspecting and interviewing.
Yeah, yeah.